Hey there, welcome back to Two No Stories. Hope you're doing great today. Let's jump right into the story. Ryan Callahan pulled into the driveway of his suburban home, cutting the engine as he sat in silence for a moment. The soft glow of the porch light flickered, casting long shadows across the front yard. It was late, later than usual, but he had stayed at the office, avoiding the inevitable awkwardness of coming home to her. His wife, Melanie, had been acting strange for months now. At first, he thought he was imagining it. She had always been a little high-strung, always pushing for more, a bigger house, a better car, fancier vacations. She thrived in the world of high-stakes corporate marketing, where power and appearance mattered more than loyalty and love. But lately, her attitude toward him had shifted entirely. There was no warmth in her voice anymore. The playful banter they once shared had been replaced with short, clipped responses. She was distant, cold, and worst of all, completely indifferent. Ryan wasn't a fool. He knew something was wrong. But tonight, he was about to find out just how deep the betrayal ran. As Ryan stepped inside, the familiar scent of lavender and vanilla from the expensive candles Melanie liked filled the air. The house was immaculate. Just like always, almost too perfect. She had always been obsessed with keeping up appearances, ensuring the house looked like something out of a magazine, especially when guests came over. But Ryan knew the truth. Their marriage was crumbling behind the perfectly arranged furniture and spotless countertops. "Mel?" he called out, shrugging off his coat. No answer. He glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. She was usually home by now. Then, as if on cue, the front door opened and Melanie stepped in, looking surprised to see him. "Oh," she said, pausing for a moment. "I didn't think you'd be home yet." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Stayed late at work." She nodded absently, kicking off her heels and setting down her designer purse. She was dressed up, more than usual, a tight black dress, red lipstick perfectly applied, hair styled just right. Ryan's stomach tightened. "You had a work dinner?" he asked casually, watching her reaction. Melanie hesitated for a fraction of a second, but it was long enough. "Yes," she finally said, brushing past him toward the kitchen. "It ran longer than expected." Ryan didn't respond. He just watched her. Because now, he knew. She was lying. Later that night, Ryan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Melanie scrolled through her phone beside him. She had turned away from him, facing the edge of the bed, her screen casting a glow over her face. There had been a time when she would cuddle into him at night, resting her head on his chest, tracing lazy circles on his skin. That time was long gone. Now they were just two strangers sharing a bed. Ryan exhaled slowly, forcing himself to remain calm. Confronting her now would be a mistake. Instead, he needed to observe, to wait, to see just how deep the deception went. The next morning, as Melanie stood by the counter pouring coffee, Ryan made a small test. "You looked nice last night," he said, casually sipping his own coffee. Melanie barely glanced up. "Thanks." Her tone was flat, uninterested. Ryan smirked. "What was the dinner about?" She hesitated, again. "Oh, just some client strategy meetings," she said, shrugging. "Nothing exciting." Another lie. Ryan knew enough about her company to know that marketing executives didn't hold client strategy meetings at high-end rooftop restaurants. He nodded, setting his mug down. "Right. Must have been important." Melanie avoided his eyes. That's when Ryan knew. She wasn't just unhappy in their marriage. She was already gone. A week later, Ryan's world officially collapsed. It happened on a Tuesday night. He had just walked in the door, expecting the usual awkward silence, when Melanie spoke first. "We need to talk." Ryan stiffened. Nothing good ever followed those 4 words. She stood in the living room, arms crossed, her expression cold and emotionless. "What's going on?" he asked carefully. Melanie exhaled, rubbing her temple like she was exhausted from even having this conversation. I don't think I can do this anymore," she said flatly. Ryan's stomach dropped. Do what? This marriage. His grip tightened on the back of the chair. Where's this coming from? Melanie scoffed. Come on, Ryan. We both know this hasn't been working for a long time. He stared at her, searching her face for any sign of hesitation. There was none. She had already made up her mind. His voice was calm, steady. So, that's it? You're just done? Melanie shifted uncomfortably but didn't deny it. Instead, she said something that made Ryan's blood run cold. I just can't stand you anymore. The words hit him like a bullet to the chest. She didn't even say it with anger or regret. She said it with indifference, like their entire marriage meant nothing, like he meant nothing. Ryan felt something inside him snap. She thought she could end this on her terms. She thought she could walk away without consequences. She was wrong. Ryan wasn't going to beg. He wasn't going to argue. He was going to let her dig her own grave, because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Ryan sat at the dining table long after Melanie had left the room, staring at the untouched glass of bourbon in front of him. Her words echoed in his mind, replaying like a broken record. I just can't stand you anymore. She had said it so casually, like he was nothing more than an old sweater she was tired of wearing. Ryan had been prepared for fights, for tears, for accusations that he hadn't been the husband she wanted. But this was indifference. She had already mentally checked out. She had already moved on. But what she didn't know? So had he. Because Melanie might think she was about to leave this marriage on her terms, but Ryan was about to show her just how wrong she was. Ryan had always been a logical man. In his career as a structural engineer, he had learned that things don't just collapse overnight. Weaknesses build over time. Cracks form unnoticed. Then, one day, the whole damn thing comes crashing down. And now it was his turn to let the cracks widen, on his own terms. He started pulling back, becoming emotionally unavailable in a way that Melanie had never expected. He stopped initiating conversations. If she spoke, he would give a polite but brief response. He no longer asked where she was going or when she'd be back. He didn't reach for her anymore at night. At dinner, he barely looked up from his plate. He became a ghost in his own home. At first, Melanie didn't seem to care. If anything, she seemed relieved. But then, she started noticing. She wasn't used to being ignored. She was used to being the one in control, the one who dictated the emotional climate of their relationship. But now, Ryan wasn't playing along. One night, she walked into the bedroom, glancing at him before hesitantly saying, "You've been quiet lately." Ryan looked up from his laptop, expression unreadable. "Yeah?" A flicker of discomfort crossed her face. She was expecting him to ask what was wrong. She was expecting him to fight for her, but he didn't. He just gave her a small, indifferent nod and went back to his screen. And just like that, for the first time in their marriage, Melanie was the one who felt invisible. While Melanie was busy second-guessing her own decisions, Ryan was busy getting to work. Because before he walked away, he was going to make sure he left with everything. He checked their phone bill records and found a mystery number that kept appearing. Late at night, long calls. He placed a GPS tracker on her car. Within days, he had proof that she was driving to a specific apartment complex after work. He hired a private investigator, and it didn't take long to confirm that Jason Wallace, her senior director, was the other man. It was almost laughable. She wasn't just cheating, she was cheating with her married boss. Ryan smirked, shaking his head. She thought she was so careful. She thought he would never find out. She thought he was stupid. But now he had everything he needed. Melanie was starting to unravel. Ryan could see it in the way she would steal glances at him as if trying to figure out what was different. One evening, as he stood at the sink washing dishes, she leaned against the counter and cleared her throat. "I was thinking," she started hesitantly, "maybe we should take a trip. Get away for a bit." Ryan didn't even look up. Her brow furrowed. "That's it?" "Just, He shrugged. I don't know. You seem like you already have enough excitement going on. She froze. For the briefest second, Ryan saw panic flash in her eyes. Then, just as quickly, she recovered. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, forcing a laugh. Ryan dried his hands on a towel, finally meeting her gaze. You tell me. She stared at him, lips slightly parted like she was trying to read him. But she couldn't, because for the first time in their marriage, she had no idea what he was thinking. And that scared the hell out of her. Ryan had spent years making sure Melanie was taken care of. That was about to change. He moved all his assets into a private account, ensuring that everything would be protected before the divorce proceedings even began. Melanie's name was removed from every joint account, investment, and property document. He contacted a divorce attorney, ensuring that he would file first, taking the upper hand. He gathered the legal proof of her affair, which would give him leverage in the settlement negotiations. But the final nail in the coffin? He sent the evidence anonymously to Jason Wallace's wife, because if Melanie thought she was going to walk away from this unscathed, she was sorely mistaken. The night before Ryan planned to confront Melanie, he walked into their bedroom and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, biting her lip. Are we okay? She asked quietly. Ryan tilted his head. What do you mean? She hesitated. You've been acting different. He smirked. I thought that's what you wanted. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, Melanie realized that she wasn't in control anymore. And Ryan? Ryan was enjoying every second of it. Because tomorrow, he was going to burn it all to the ground. And she would never see it coming. Ryan sat in his office, the glow of the laptop screen casting sharp shadows across his face. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, scanning through the latest report from his private investigator. There it was, time-stamped photos, hotel check-in records, call logs, text messages, undeniable proof that his wife had been lying to his face for months. The latest surveillance photos showed Melanie and Jason Wallace entering a 5-star hotel downtown. The timestamp? The same night she had told Ryan she was working late on a client project. The text messages were even worse. Melanie, God, last night was amazing. I wish I could just stay with you forever. Jason, soon, babe. Once I wrap up some things, we'll figure it out. Melanie, Ryan is so checked out anyway. He barely even looks at me. If only he knew. Ryan clenched his jaw. If only he knew. Oh, he knew. And soon, she was going to know too. But she wouldn't just know. She would feel it. Because now Ryan was done playing games. Ryan had always been methodical. It was in his nature. He had analyzed structures for a living, pinpointing where the foundation was weakest and predicting where the cracks would form. His marriage? It had collapsed long before today, and now he was about to bring the rest of it crashing down. He transferred the final pieces of their joint assets into his private accounts, ensuring that when he walked away, he would be walking away with everything. He changed the locks on his private office at home, packed away anything of value that belonged to him, and made sure that when the storm hit, Melanie wouldn't have a single place to hide. And then he sent the email. A single email, with every piece of evidence attached. Subject line: You might want to check this. Recipient: Jason Wallace's wife. Ryan leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. The dominoes had been set. Now, all he had to do was wait. 2 days later, Ryan walked into the house at 7 p.m. sharp. The moment he stepped through the door, he knew. The air was tense, thick with something unspoken. Then, Melanie appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her eyes locked onto his, and for the first time in a long time, she looked afraid. Ryan. She started, her voice barely above a whisper. He smirked. Something wrong? She hesitated. I need to talk to you. He dropped his keys onto the counter, shrugging off his jacket. Go ahead. She swallowed hard. Did you send something to Jason's wife? Ryan's smirk widened. Bullseye. Why do you ask? He said casually. Melanie's hands shook. She sent me an email today, with screenshots, photos. She knows everything, Ryan. He tilted his head, feigning surprise. Everything? She exhaled shakily. Ryan, listen, I know you're upset. Upset? He let out a short, humorless laugh. That's an interesting choice of words. She took a slow step down the stairs. I never wanted to hurt you. Ryan's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice eerily calm. But you did. Tears welled in her eyes. I was confused. Save it, he interrupted. Melanie flinched. Ryan sighed, rubbing his temple. You know what the saddest part is, Mel, he said quietly. I actually would have fought for us. I would have tried. But you threw it all away. And for what? Jason Wallace? Her breath hitched. It wasn't just about Jason, Ryan scoffed. No, of course not. It was about you. It was always about you. Melanie stood there, trembling, her world crumbling around her. And then Ryan delivered the final blow. You should probably pack a bag, he said, his voice void of emotion. Divorce papers will be on the table in the morning. Melanie staggered back. Ryan, please. You should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't enough. And with that, Ryan walked upstairs, leaving her standing alone in the wreckage she created. The next morning, Melanie's phone buzzed non-stop. Jason had disappeared. He wasn't answering her calls. He wasn't responding to her texts. She finally found out why when she checked her email. From Jason Wallace. Subject: This is a disaster. Melanie, my wife, left. She took the kids, she took the house, and she's filing for divorce. Do not call me. Do not contact me. This is over. Melanie stared at the screen, her blood running cold. Jason was gone. Her marriage was gone. Her life, as she knew it, over. That evening, Melanie tried one last time. She waited until Ryan came home, standing near the door like a woman on the verge of collapse. He sighed the moment he saw her. Mel, don't. Ryan, just talk to me, please, she begged, her voice breaking. Ryan set his keys down, looking at her with nothing but cold detachment. You want me to talk? He said. Fine, let's talk. He walked toward her, his expression unreadable. Let's talk about how you mocked me behind my back. Let's talk about how you spent months sneaking around, thinking I wouldn't find out. Let's talk about how you told Jason that I was checked out when, in reality, I was the only one still trying. Melanie sobbed. I was stupid. Yeah, Ryan agreed. You were. She took a shaky breath. I can fix this. He chuckled, shaking his head. No, you can't. A heavy silence stretched between them. Then Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. Melanie took it with trembling hands, opening it slowly. Inside, a plane ticket. One-way flight to New York, Ryan said. Figured you might need it since you won't be staying here. She gasped. Ryan. Goodbye, Mel. And just like that, he walked past her, out the front door, leaving her standing there, shattered, holding the last thing she would ever receive from him. A ticket out of his life. For good. Melanie sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the plane ticket Ryan had given her. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She had lost. Jason was gone. Ryan had walked away without looking back. And now, she had nowhere to go. Her phone buzzed on the table, and for a brief moment, hope flared in her chest. Maybe Jason had changed his mind. Maybe he was reaching out to fix things. Maybe. She grabbed the phone. It wasn't Jason, it was her boss. Her stomach twisted as she hesitated before answering. Melanie. The voice on the other end was sharp, emotionless. We need to talk. She already knew what was coming, but she had no idea how bad it was going to get. Meanwhile, across the city, Jason Wallace was sitting in his office, except it wasn't his office anymore. Security guards stood outside waiting to escort him out. His desk had already been cleared, and the HR director sat across from him with a folder full of termination documents. "This is ridiculous," Jason snapped, slamming his fists on the desk. "I have built this company." The HR director didn't blink. "And you tore it down with your reckless decisions," she replied coldly. "Your personal affairs have become a liability. The board has decided your contract will be terminated immediately." Jason's pulse pounded in his ears. Everything he had worked for was gone. His phone buzzed. His wife, or more accurately, his soon-to-be ex-wife. She had already filed for divorce, taken the house, and blocked his credit cards. He was homeless, jobless, and completely ruined. All because of one mistake, and because of Ryan Callahan. Back at the house, Melanie arrived at the office early, her hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. She had no idea how much Ryan had done behind the scenes, but she was about to find out. The moment she walked into the building, the stares started. Whispers followed. By the time she reached her desk, she knew. Everyone had seen it. She logged into her work email, and there it was, an anonymous message sent to her department, linking to a scandalous exposé about her affair with Jason Wallace. Attached were screenshots of texts between her and Jason, photos of them entering and leaving hotels, and evidence that Jason had diverted company funds for their business trips. She gasped, her hands covering her mouth. This wasn't just a public humiliation. This was a career-ending disaster. Her boss called her into his office. "Melanie, sit down." She barely made it into the chair before he slid a termination letter across the desk. "You violated company policy," he continued. "Your conduct has embarrassed this firm and jeopardized client trust." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, I need this job." Her boss sighed. "You should have thought about that before you got involved with your married boss. HR will finalize your exit paperwork today." Her career was over. Ryan had made sure of it. Melanie drove home in a daze. Her head pounded, her stomach twisted in knots. Her life had completely fallen apart in 48 hours. And there was only one person responsible. Ryan. She pulled into the driveway, barely remembering how she got there, and rushed inside. "Ryan!" she shouted. Silence. She ran upstairs, checking the bedroom. Empty. The closet? Half of the clothes were gone. She stumbled back, her heart pounding. In the office, she found a letter sitting on his desk. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Melanie, I hope it was worth it. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." Ryan. Her legs gave out and she collapsed onto the floor. For the first time, the reality of her new life sank in. No husband, no job, no future, nothing. Ryan had taken everything, and she had let him. While Melanie was falling apart, Ryan was thriving. He had moved into a new condo downtown, started a new business venture, and most importantly, he had Ethan. After the divorce filing, Ethan had chosen to live with him, making it clear he wanted nothing to do with his mother. One evening, as they sat watching a game, Ethan turned to Ryan. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. Ryan took a sip of his drink before answering. "I regret wasting so much time on someone who didn't deserve it," he said honestly. Ethan nodded. "I get that." Ryan turned to him, a small smile forming. "But I don't regret having you." Ethan grinned. "Good, 'cause I don't regret having you either." Ryan patted his son on the shoulder. They were finally free. And that was all that mattered. Months later, Melanie sat in a cramped apartment, barely able to afford rent. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. From Ryan Callahan. Subject: Finalized divorce settlement. Her hands shook as she opened it. She had received nothing. No alimony, no house, no savings. Ryan had made sure she was left with exactly what she deserved. 0. Tears streamed down her face as she realized this was it. This was her life now. And Ryan? Ryan was never looking back. Ryan sat on the balcony of his new high-rise apartment, the cool evening breeze washing over him as he watched the city lights flicker below. It had been 6 months since he had walked away from the ruins of his marriage, 6 months since he had left Melanie with nothing but regret and an empty future. He had thought that maybe, just maybe, time would bring him some kind of satisfaction. But the truth was, he had already felt it the moment he walked out the door that night. Melanie had been so sure she was in control, so confident in her ability to manipulate the situation in her favor. She had spent months lying, sneaking around, and laughing behind his back, thinking he would never figure it out. But she had underestimated him. And now, she was nothing but a distant memory. While Melanie's life had crumbled into a pit of financial and emotional ruin, Ryan had thrived. He had launched his own engineering consultancy, something he had always dreamed of but had put off for the sake of stability. Now, he was running his own company, choosing the clients he wanted, and living on his own terms. Business was booming, and with each new contract he felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he was in control of his life, not weighed down by the constant demands of a selfish partner. He no longer had to tiptoe around a woman who belittled him, nor did he have to spend his days wondering if the person he loved was lying straight to his face. There was a clarity to his life now that he hadn't felt in a long time, and it was liberating. Ethan had also flourished in ways Ryan hadn't expected. After choosing to live with him instead of Melanie, the bond between father and son had grown stronger than ever. Ethan had once been a quiet, reserved teenager who seemed unsure of his place in the world. But now, with Ryan's unwavering support, he was thriving. His basketball skills had improved tremendously, and he had even landed a scholarship offer from a well-known university. Seeing his son succeed, knowing that he had provided him with a stable and loving home, filled Ryan with more pride than any personal victory ever could. Melanie had tried to reach out a few times over the past months, but Ryan never responded. Her emails, filled with regret and empty apologies, went unread. Her desperate attempts to call were met with silence. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. He had no interest in revisiting a past that had nearly destroyed him. He had won, and he didn't need her acknowledgement to know it. She had already lost more than she could ever recover. Meanwhile, Jason Wallace had met an even grimmer fate. After losing his job, his wife, and his financial stability, he had tried to rebuild, but his reputation was permanently tainted. No one in his industry would touch him, and word had spread quickly about his indiscretions. With lawsuits piling up and legal troubles closing in on him, he had finally fled town, trying to outrun the disaster he had created. Ryan had heard through mutual acquaintances that Jason had taken a job far beneath his qualifications, working in a field that barely allowed him to scrape by. The powerful executive who once thought himself untouchable was now just another fallen man, drowning in the consequences of his own arrogance. One evening, as Ryan was finishing up work, his phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Please, just hear me out." He already knew who it was from. He hesitated for a moment, then, without a second thought, deleted it. Melanie's words no longer held any power over him. She could beg, plead, and try to rewrite history, but it wouldn't change the reality she had created for herself. Ryan was done looking back. Later that night, he met Olivia for dinner, a woman he had started seeing after everything had settled. She was different from Melanie in every way, kind, genuine, and unpretentious. There were no games, no power struggles, just easy conversation and mutual respect. As they sat on the restaurant's rooftop terrace, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Olivia reached for his hand. "You seem different tonight," she said, tilting her head with curiosity. "Like something's finally settled." Ryan smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I think it has," he admitted. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. He wasn't trapped in a cycle of second-guessing, wondering if he was being lied to. He was finally, truly free. And as he raised his glass to the future, he knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. His past was behind him. His future was waiting, and it had never looked brighter. What would you do if you discovered your wife secretly despised you and was plotting to leave? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and comment below, and of course, subscribe for more.